Let's turn to our first guest on this today, and that is Paul Scully. He is a South London MP. He's also Minister for London. Good morning to you, Paul.
Morning to you, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to speak to you today because, really as an MP rather than a government minister, but we're going to be talking to Transport Minister as well in a few minutes about this. But this is not the first. It won't be the last stabbing of a child in our capital city. This doesn't just happen in London. It happens in other major cities. It happens in towns. It happens in villages. What was your reaction when you heard the news about this story?
I was absolutely horrified to hear that news because I think, as you described, I think it's less to do with the fact that she went to an independent school. I think it's more the fact, as you rightly say, just going about her business, just going to school of a morning, and this is not exacerbated by any other situation, just going about your daily business. And it's when knife crime really comes into everybody's life. That's surely got to be the wake-up call, as you rightly say. There's a lot of people that need to get involved in this. Government, we've got to take our role to the Home Office, the Ministry of Justice, and the Education, of course. But the Mayor is the focal point. He's the guy that can pull all the strings as our de facto Police and Crime Commissioner, as the person that's really representing many different communities in London that really needs to piece this together. He needs to step up and piece this together.
I mean, everyone does. I think there's one group of people you missed out there, and that's parents. But let's have a little listen and watch what Chief Superintendent Andy Brittain had to say about this awful, awful death.
Sadly, despite their efforts, a 15-year-old girl died at the scene. This is every parent's worst nightmare, and I know the officers who responded this morning, along with our emergency service colleagues, are devastated at the victim's death.
Look, we're all devastated at the death, Paul Scully. We're talking about every parent's worst nightmare. I mean, I imagine it's a bit of a nightmare for the parents of the 17-year-old boy who's been arrested. No charges brought as yet, and obviously we don't want to prejudice any possible future action. But there are going to be question marks raised by most parents. It's like, I like to think that if my child was walking around carrying a machete or a sword-like length of knife, or any knife at all, I'd know about it. We need the authorities to act. As you said, government, we need mayor to act, we need the police to act, but we also, and communities. But fundamentally, when your child is, if your child is living with you under 18, they're your responsibility. We need parents to step up.
Oh, absolutely. We can't sort of abrogate the responsibility of parents for expecting government, even and the mayor and others to step in. I don't think it's always possible for a parent to know, because especially if people are getting involved in knives, in drugs, in gang culture, they tend to have ways of leaving the knives elsewhere and picking them up and getting around parents. That's always been the case. But in these kind of cases, it's the most severest consequences, because it's not just that life that's been lost, that 15-year-old poor girl. This guy has no future if he's if the court case goes through and is found guilty. It's just that criminal charge, that long prison sentence, these kind of things. It's destroying both sides of the equation. It's destroying people's lives.
What can be done today? What can be done today? Because I know every parent I know today was, yesterday, just checking out. My daughter was home later than I expected her to be. I sent a message, everything okay? Yeah, I'll be home in a moment. Just that little bit of anxiety. There'll be lots of parents, particularly in that area, but I think across the country, who'll just be saying, just watch out, don't get involved in anything, walk away. You've got to keep safe. They will be that little bit more anxious today. What can be done today to make sure that no other parent has to see their child on a morgue slab?
Yeah, so let's work backwards from the problem. So first of all, we've got to make sure the sentencing is right. We've got an update to the legislation to make sure they're getting rid of the loopholes to allow people to be carrying these knives and zombie knives and those kind of things as well. Then you back up to allow the police to be able to have more powers with stop and search. That needs to be intelligence-led. It needs to have the trust of the community, which then comes back to the work that Commissioner Mark Rowley is doing in terms of regaining the trust in the Met Police, which is still in special measures.
Yep.
So he's got to fulfil all the requirements of the Louise Casey report. But then you've got to go back further than that, because as you rightly say, once you've got a knife in your hand, it's too late. You've got to get back to the education. You've got to get into early stage intervention. The government's put £200 million into a youth fund to actually, over the next 10 years, to be able to spend over the next 10 years to really understand the evidence base behind what is fueling this gang culture, this disregard.
Well, I'll tell you one of the things is fueling it, and that's we need to bring back dads. I'm old-fashioned like this. Paul Scully, I know you're a Tory MP. You just stand to be London mayoral candidate. You're London MP for Sutton and Cheam, relatively nearby Croydon, and Minister for London. Thank you for that. Up next.